Alright, I think I finally understood perspective. You just draw a horizon line, put the vanishing points on it, following the lines, and boom, perfect perspective. I've always struggled with my backgrounds. Like, they look fine at first glance, but the longer I stare at them, the more something feels off. A lot of my older illustrations either had just plain colors for backgrounds, overly blurred scribbles, or the occasional attempts that still look kinda janky. Good backgrounds are a huge part of making an illustration feels complete. So I decided to lock in and finally figure out why my backgrounds keep looking weird. What I eventually realized was that I wasn't struggling with perspective itself, I was struggling with all the tiny mistakes that no one talks about. Things that not enough people emphasize but can completely ruin your background if you don't understand them. So the first mistake that I wanted to share is putting the vanishing points too close to the canvas. Speaking from experience, beginners might naturally assume perspective setup should stay close to the actual drawing. But in reality, professionals often place these points ridiculously far from the canvas. Back when I was taught to place the vanishing points outside the canvas, I wasn't aware of how actually far they should be. For example, here's a town from Japan. Look how ridiculously far I need to zoom out for the full picture. Of course, in this case, because the scene is viewed more naturally, the vanishing points are really far apart. But character-centric illustrations can also have relatively far perspective setups. This kind of scene more so harmonizes both the character and background together, rather than emphasizing the individual elements. However, that's still not to say all vanishing points needed to be distant. You might came across some illustrations with crazy foreshortening and perspective like these. Well, this is all thanks to having a very close vanishing points to really push that dynamism. The closer the vanishing points, the more distorted the perspective, and it creates a more dramatic depth and exaggeration. So in the end of the day, it's not whether how far you should draw your vanishing points, it's more so what type fits the style of illustration you want. Just leave a mental note that if you're going for a more dynamic piece, you should consider moving the vanishing points a bit closer to the canvas. But even after fixing my perspective, I realized I had another terrible habit: not planning my compositions. I'm sure you've seen time lapses of professional artists drawing multiple thumbnails before settling with the best one. Please don't be like me and treating this as a waste of time. Initially, I thought thumbnails were just a way of trying out different poses. But after looking more into it, I realized professional artists are using them to plan entirely different scenes. Things like perspectives, camera angles, lighting can all be easily tested using thumbnails. Shaving off a short period by not planning would just come back to bite when nothing in your drawing makes sense. Here is an old illustration I did. Looks decent, but overall bland composition and lighting. Here are 3 thumbnails I planned in just 20 minutes, all of them looked so much better. If you really don't want to, there's nothing inherently wrong with going into a drawing blind, but for the sake of learning and improving, purposefully not doing it because I think it's a waste of time or I've got everything planned in my mind is just a massive missed opportunity. Planning helps massively at catching mistakes early before heavy rendering. Maybe your perspective is off, background placement could be improved, or when you realize the lighting was entirely different than you have imagined. Even now that I learned it the hard way, I still find it annoying having to plan my compositions beforehand. But admittedly, this process saved me more time than otherwise ignoring it. My third tip isn't so much about drawing, but instead my way of thinking. I remember seeing Sam Does Art's time-lapse on YouTube, and just seeing him scribble in his backgrounds and blurring them, but the end result still looked so good. So obviously, I want to do the same, and failed immediately. Sam finished his paintings in 2 hours, and somehow I thought I could do the same.
Guys, wake up! Wake up!
I've mentioned that I love drawing characters, so it's natural that whenever I get the chance, I would want to cut corners on my backgrounds. Don't get me wrong, cutting corners is fair, assuming you know how backgrounds work. These artists mastered backgrounds and perspectives just so they're able to simplify them correctly. And as a self-learning artist, I'm just unable to skip through all that and not face consequences. So if I need to put effort into simplifying my backgrounds anyway, why not just draw them properly? I hated drawing backgrounds because it's intimidating, having to keep track of perspectives, values, and lighting all at the same time. And that kind of fear is what makes me lower my efforts when drawing them. Turns out, half my problem wasn't skill. I just wasn't giving backgrounds the same level of attention as I give everything else. So just by simply splitting your efforts, it can help improve your overall illustrations by so much more. And if you're a character priority artist like me, splitting your efforts doesn't mean sacrificing the character, it actually makes the drawing process easier by removing the guesswork. Assuming you treat the backgrounds well, it may have already decided the lightings and perspectives for you. I know simply saying give them both equal attention is easier said than done. So I'll at least show you some tricks I've picked up that drastically improve my backgrounds. The first being the selection tool, or lasso. There's a version of this tool in Krita which lets you select areas in straight lines, and I hate the fact that I did not discover it sooner. It makes rendering so much easier. I also use a lot of airbrush for rendering backgrounds. It's a very quick way for applying gradients instead of just flat base colors. And pairing it with the selection tool helps to create this soft and hard edge paint strokes. If you're just starting out rendering backgrounds and feel a little overwhelmed on what to do first, my process generally goes like this. Background sketches first, or at least the important elements to determine bases such as the perspective. Next is the character sketch following that perspective. It is okay to spend more time here as it is the focus of the illustration. Follow up with the rough lightings of the character and the backgrounds before moving on to the usual rendering. And my final word of advice, please don't skip out on the basics like perspective guides. I didn't mention the fundamentals in this video, but it's still important and you should not be ignoring them. So in a nutshell, this video isn't like your typical background tutorial. It's more so a bunch of struggles I had when studying backgrounds and piled them up together into a digestible video. I used to hate drawing backgrounds and avoid them whenever I can, but after actually sitting down and paying attention to my mistakes, things just became a lot more simple. My current backgrounds and overall skills are far from the artists I looked up to, but with this, at least I know I'm heading towards the right direction. Thank you so much for watching, and that's all from me. Bye bye!